All right, so everybody knows by now our podcast wants to make Solo 2 happen. Not sure how likely that is. Maybe Han Solo appear. I mean, Alden Ehrenreich's star is rising. You know, he's getting a lot of acclaimed praise for his role in Oppenheimer. His own directorial pursuits seem to be gathering buzz. So we'll see if he returns to Star Wars, but we are going to talk about Han Solo here, James, but a bit different than how people look at Han Solo. Typically, I think when people think of Han Solo, they think of his bravado, his humor, his brashness, his bravery, all these cool moments about this character that has been quite fleshed out. But I want to talk about the tragedy of Han Solo, and we'll get to that in a bit on our main discussion. So people probably see the title. What do you mean, tragedy of Han Solo? What are you talking about? The only tragedy of Han Solo is that they didn't make a second Solo movie, which is true. But I do think it's fair to label Han's ending as a tragedy. But we'll talk about that later. James, first of all, how you doing, man? I see you're wearing the Paul Sung-Young Lee sweatshirt.
Oh, yeah.
Bitter Asian
cool dude, man. Are you a fan? You're not, I'm sure. But did you ever watch The Last Airbender?
No.
Never watched the anime?
No. I don't really watch anime. That's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Look, if you're gonna break it down, I had a conversation with this one time with someone at it was a store. It was like a store clerk, and we were talking about anime. I was like, they were like, "Do you like anime?" And I was like, "I used to like anime when you could say, yeah, I like anime, and that meant that you probably watched like 25% of all anime that was in America."
Mm.
And it was like, you knowing about it or being aware of it like meant that you were into anime. Being into anime today is like saying, I don't even know. Like, I like to cook, but it means like you're not even anywhere close to having like knowing all recipes or anything like that. It's just, there's so much out there. It's impossible to keep up with everything. But I mean, I don't really watch it either. I watch anime as if like somebody said it was a really good show. Mm-hmm. You know, like, oh, are you watching
Grey's Anatomy?
No, like for All Mankind or whatever. You know, I'm like, oh no, I haven't watched that. I'll start watching that or something like that. I just picked up The Last Airbender because people just went on and on about how good of a show it was. I was like, all right, I'll check it out. But anyway, all that to get back to the point is that he is playing a very important and pivotal character in that show.
That's what I heard.
One that, like, I mean, they could change things around, but I don't think they're going to. They're going to keep it pretty loyal. But like, he's a character that like is in like episode 1 and is in, you know, the final episode. Like, he's all the way through the series. So, and it's really cool to see him do more outside of The Mandalorian, because I think most of us were probably introduced to him either from that or Kim's Convenience. And and the people who know him from Kim's Convenience obviously love him too from that. Like, that show's great. He's great in Mandalorian. Can't wait to see him play that person.
Well, also, you know, we've had him on the
Airbender.
show and he's a great guy.
Yes. Yeah.
Through and through. Like, he interacts with people on social media and like, just, he was such a genuinely nice guy. And I'd love to have him back. I know he's getting a bit busier and probably even more popular, which I'm happy for, but a great guy, as everyone knows. We're not here to, you know, reveal how awesome he is. Everyone knows that by now. But one thing about Carson Teva, his character, is not dead. Very much alive in Star Wars, which is a good thing. But just to break the ice here, James, by the way, welcome everybody. Resistance Broadcast. You know, it was a bit of a cold open, but thanks everybody for joining us on this episode. So hopefully you are subscribed to the show on your favorite podcast app or our YouTube channel, wherever that may be. Lacey will be with us on Thursday for TRB Live as she's easing her way back into full time. But we are here to give you a good podcast to kick off your week. But James, to kick things off here, if you were a Star Wars character, how would you, if, and like the director's like, bad news, sort of like JJ to Greg Grunberg, you gotta die. How would you want your character to go out?
All right. Well, we were just talking about anime, so I'll bring a little anime into it. Dragon Ball Z, my favorite character is Trunks. And my screen name, Myra Trunks, right? That's that character. One of the coolest moments in the series, in my opinion, is we just spent like 100 episodes of the main character trying to beat this bad guy. He was so impossible to beat. He just kept coming back. He was more powerful. And then after everything was done, he shows back up as like a robot character. And they're like, oh my God, he's still alive. And then out of nowhere, this other character walks just like through the dust or whatever. And he's this person, and he powers up, and he's just immediately way more powerful than this other bad guy. And he shows his power by ending this person in one foul swoop. He just comes up right behind him. The guy turns around and he takes his sword and goes, and
that's how you want to go out?
Yeah. And it cuts to his vision, and you see the person standing there with the sword like drawn, and then the screen like splits. And then it shows him with a cut down his like whole body. So I was like, man, that's just like one of the craziest scenes that like craziest deaths. Like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. So I would think it'd be really cool to be for a long time a pivotal character that it just is inevitably never gonna die, and then just have some Jedi show up, and I'll be like, I've dealt with Jedi before, you are no problem to me, and have this person be so powerful that in just one quick second they just like right up to me and just slice me right down the middle. Be so awesome.
I like that. That'll be one that fans would like probably watch a lot and like joke about.
I think they'd get the homage too.
Yeah.
Be like, oh man, that's cool.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I would say for me, if I was like an Imperial officer, like a known name, like officer number 5, I'd want one of those funny deaths where like Han Solo throws like a box of tools at me and I fall over a railing. So people always talk about that guy in Return of the Jedi in the bunker. I think it might even been Ben Burt who played the character. Like, that guy fell off the railing because Han Solo threw a box of hammers at him. That's hilarious. Or like the guy whose like ship crashes into another ship and his hologram disappears in Empire, like one of those. But if I was a lead, like a main character,
you want to be a Wilhelm scream guy?
I could do a Wilhelm scream guy. Yeah. That'd be amazing. Are you kidding? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you know that famous scream in all these movies? Like, I got to do that. But if I was a main character, I think I would like to die like Yoda, which is just like really old and like you're like sort of like tired and you're like under a blanket and someone you care about's with you and you just sort of like go and you're like, it's on your terms in a sort of way. I think I would want to do that. So that's my answers. I want to know what everyone else thinks about that, except Lacey. Lacey does not like talking about death. But I did warn her about one of our Will of the Force topics, as you know. So we're gonna go with that now. But James, why don't we get into it? Let's get into Will of the Force.
All right.
Love it.
I fear nothing, for all is as the Force wills it.
That's right. Will of the Force this week. Tough choices are about to be made here on Will of the Force. We're going to pitch some questions and guess whether something will or will not happen in Star Wars. But in addition to those questions that we come up with, our Patreon supporters also are able to submit questions to the topic via Patreon. So they send them in and we take them and we pick them out and we say, hey, Commander Mike Rangel, you get to be on the show this week with one of your questions. Mike wanted to know, kicking it off with the first one here, regarding concern for Mando jumping to film, In comparing the lore, history, and homework needed these days when a new Marvel film is released, will people have an easier time jumping into a Mando film than going to see a new MCU one? So the question, just to summarize really here, is sometimes with Marvel, it can be really complicated to understand what's going on leading up to the release of a film. Do we think that The Mandalorian, being a television show first, is going to have that difficulty where fans say, I didn't see the first one, I don't know what's going on, I'm not going to go see that movie? What do you think, John?
I think there's two sides to this, one that supports Mando, one that supports Marvel. I think the Marvel element will always have in its back pocket the history of the comics, cartoons, other iterations of movies where, yeah, the lore and stuff is important, but people will be like, oh, it's a Spider-Man movie? I know Spider-Man. I'm going to go watch Spider-Man. Or, whatever. Mandalorian doesn't have that. So that's a point for Marvel. But on the other hand, with Mando, you just you can just jump in and try to just catch up on the Mando story and not even worry about the other stuff that's outside of it. That to a point where even if with all the history of Star Wars, if you want to just jump into Star Wars, you can probably jump right into the Mandalorian and not feel too behind or anything. You just go on this journey with this character and evolve with him as he evolves on screen before our eyes and humanizes himself. So I'm gonna say I think they would have an easier time if it is for lore focus to jump into Mando, because I think the way Marvel has laid itself out and they connect everything, you won't get the full experience if you don't backstory yourself the way you would if you leaped into Mando from page one or scene one. So I'm going to say by a bit, Mando would be easier.
So my answer to this is actually that it's not a total fair question to say that the MCU has all of this lore that you need to learn before you go into a movie, because there are multiple kinds of Marvel movies. And just to, make it very black and white, there's a big difference between an audience going to see Captain Marvel, not the Marvels, Captain Marvel, the first one, or a Thor, right? Just the one-off movie versus an Endgame or something, or any one of these Avengers movies. You probably wouldn't want to go see an Avengers movie if you haven't been watching that phase leading up to it, right? But if you just want to jump into any one of these, Shang-Chi or something like that, that's going to be what The Mandalorian is. I think that The Mandalorian is going to make sure that even though they've had the show, they are going to treat it as though it is an entry film. And what I might be saying the same thing when we get there eventually, but if they do have this like Dave Filoni culmination, multiple series come together, that might be more of the Avengers, where like we're hoping you watched all the shows and paid attention leading up to this. I do not think Mandalorian is going to be that. I think that it is going to be a straightforward standalone. You do not have need to see the series. So I hope that answers the question, Mike. Thank you. I hope that's good for everybody too. I hope I hope nobody's disappointed if it does turn into something where it's like, where was the payoff for me spending 3 seasons with The Mandalorian? None of the show ended, in the movie or anything like that. So we'll see.
I don't know if he's in our Discord yet because he just signed up. We got to get him in there, but thanks for signing up, man. Appreciate the support, and very tough question to kick it off. So thank you, man. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah. We got another one here of the officially announced, or at least confirmed by the filmmaker kind of situation, movies that weren't showcased at Star Wars Celebration 2023. Which of these do you think is most likely to be made, John? There's the Lando movie, which is, of course, written by Donald and Stephen Glover, so they're working on it directly. There's the Shawn Levy movie, there's the Taika Waititi movie, and there's the Rian Johnson movie. While you're thinking it over, I think the most likely one to be made is the Shawn Levy movie. It's by your face, I'm assuming that's not the answer you're expecting.
Well, no, go on. Finish your answer.
Okay. I think it's the Shawn Levy movie because to me, he is probably the most seasoned out of everybody. He's been around a very long time making movies that maybe are not necessarily for everybody, but he like puts it out and it is what it is. And everybody's, it just, I don't know. I think he's just a very like tried and true filmmaker. And the funny thing about his situation that we're currently in with him is that he is sort of tied to two movies. That's kind of the rumor. So even if one sort of fails, he might get pulled in to make a movie. And even if the other one is successful, he might just make a standalone movie. So he's the only one here that almost has higher odds just based on that alone. But what do you think? Which one do you think will get made?
When the levee breaks. I smiled because I just realized you picked the only one that hasn't been officially announced.
Oh, yeah.
But
I could add more about the two of those movies. I'm like, I don't even think are ever going to happen because I think they're going to get written off over time.
I agree with what you're saying there, but I am also saying Shawn Levy's movie. I think, with Wolverine, Hugh Jackman, and I feel like Ryan Reynolds is still like a big draw. I think Deadpool 3 is going to crush. I think even though the landscape of the movie industry is bleak and less and less movies are doing well. Like there are still big ones like Oppenheimer and Barbie, but it's not the way it was a few years ago. Who knows if that changes, but I think that's gonna be one of those movies this year that's people are gonna be like, man, Deadpool 3 crushed people, man. So I think that's gonna be a good sign and break the curse that you like to put out there about they get people in and then they put a stinker out. So
but then again, part of like the opposite of what I'm saying is like Shawn Levy might be working on this movie, puts out Deadpool 3, it doesn't crush.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think
suddenly, I know, yeah. So
I think it is going to be the Shawn Levy one, even though that's the only one that hasn't been officially announced. I think that's the most likely we'll see made. I do think we are going to get the Lando movie. I don't know where they're going to fit that in or how that's going to happen, but why would Stephen Glover come out and say, we're doing it as a movie now, if it's still not very much in motion, So I think that's going to happen. I think that's going to be as close as we're ever going to get to a Solo 2 at this point. So maybe there's a chance Alden pops up in there with Chewie. I think that'd be awesome. So I'm rooting for that. And I'm not here saying I'm rooting against any of these, but the question is, which one will we most likely see? I think it's Shawn Levy.
The interesting thing also too about that Donald and Stephen Glover thing, to add one more thing, is that they were working on a show. Now they're working on a movie. And I think that's telling of maybe what was going on at Disney Plus and like what we've been hearing over the course of like, we're done with movies. Disney Plus is the future. And then now it's sort of like, we'll get back to you on what shows are coming out. You should be looking at our theatrical movies. It's like, so they seem to be in the conversation of like, do you guys still want to do a show? Like, or we would rather you not do a show because we might be moving away from that, but we really want you to do it. So can you rework it as a movie? And they're like, yeah, sure.
And they weren't attached to write. It was just Donald Glover was going to star. The original writer was jettisoned. So clearly there is movement here, and hopefully good movement. But yeah, I still think Shawn Levy has a rising star happening here with Lucasfilm. We'll see.
All right. Are you the next person who submitted a question to Will the Force? If your name is Kibbles and Siths, then yes, you are. Commander Kibbles and Siths sent us in a question, and we're going to answer it right now. Will Finn have a large role in the new Rey movie? John, what do you think?
Big time. I think Boyega's coming back. I think that announcement will happen this year. I hope it isn't leaked first, but it probably will be. Not leaked, but like a trade will report it or something.
Right.
But I think he's coming back, and I think he's coming back in a big way. And it's going to involve the Force, some lightsaber stuff. And I think he'll be excited to return because him and Daisy really have a very good relationship too. So she's so on board. I think that would help there too. And I also think it would just be it would be a little odd if she's the only one to come back, because then it'd be like, whoa, where's Finn now? What's he doing? Then they have to write some book about how he's running a deli somewhere in the other galaxy, So I think he is coming back, and I don't think Boyega would return just for a sort of cameo type of thing. I think Oscar Isaac maybe would, show up early, sacrificial lamb to kick things into high gear. But Finn, I think, will have a big role upon his return, so I do think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm 100% actually with you on this. Is this 3 out of 3 then? We're agreeing on everything.
Did you land on Mando on the first one? That Mando would be easier? I think you did.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. 3 out of 3.
So the thing about Finn being a Jedi is I actually think that the thing about him being in the movie is I think it's as simple as saying we're going to make you a Jedi. I think that there's more to the story, I know, but I think that part of the story that we heard was just like he was sort of under the impression that JJ's story was that's where we were going to go, and it didn't go that way, and he was kind of like, oh man, I was sort of misled. I kind of not that I wouldn't have done it, but I was kind of hoping that that's the direction I would go. So when JJ came back, he sort of fixed that. And I think this is the number one way to get him back beyond a paycheck. We'll pay you $20 billion to be in the movie. He'd probably do it. But at the end of the day, I think if you want to win him over personally and say we want to get you back on board, we want to tell you what it's going to be and have you just know in full confidence that is in fact what's going to happen. I think you can win him over by being no, it's going to be you and Rey, and you guys are going to be Force users, and you're going to go on journeys, and you're going to do these things. I think that wins him over.
I like that, but I don't want it to be a situation where they need to woo John Boyega back. I want him to want to come back. I don't want it to be a under all these conditions type of thing, because I don't think that needs to be the case. This isn't no offense to him, he's not Harrison Ford. I want him back, and I want Finn to have a great big giant role. I like the idea of them further pursuing his Force sensitivity from Episode 9. You could even maybe say Force Awakens. He's part of the Force Awakening, but I don't want it to be I'll come back, but I have to be the strongest Jedi and I need to do this and that. I hope he wants to come back. I hope it's not just on all of his conditions, because that would rub me the wrong way a little bit as a fan. But I see what you're saying.
When it comes to that, I don't think they're writing a story just so that they can get John Boyega back. I think that JJ set it up, as he should have, and he did, that is the next logical step. And so when they eventually make that movie, then they're like, oh good, because that's what John wanted anyway, so it all works out. I don't think they're doing it to win him over, but I think that the fact that they are doing it is he's okay, yeah, cool, that's what I wanted anyway. What color is his lightsaber, by the way? I'm torn between two.
It won't be blue. I know that. Okay. It will not be blue.
I'm torn between blue and what do you think?
I think it's going to be green, or they follow the pattern of Rey and it's a new color, like orange or, something. They won't do purple, because then they'll be oh, that's ridiculous. Mace wouldn't do that, and now he has it. I think that would be a weird, bad look, but
maybe I thought purple. I thought blue or purple, and I thought the reason they would do purple is you're thinking of it in a bad way, they're sticking him with purple. But but I'm thinking of it of like he would like want to be purple because it's like an empowering thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe.
heck yeah.
I just remember when he got cast, they were like, obviously people like thin-brained were like, oh, he must be Lando's kid, or he's a descendant of Mace Windu.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's other black people in Star Wars, like in the galaxy. I mean, maybe they need more in the cast, so I get that, but
Right.
in the galaxy, like really? So if they just give him like a purple lightsaber, it's gonna like fuel that, and he may feel that way too.
I guess
don't know.
that's fair.
But
I mean, it would be like
green?
giving a female character a pink lightsaber. Or something,
Yeah, I'm saying.
you know,
Yeah, I'm
like,
saying for standard, I would say green because we've already seen him with a blue one. So change that up, change the tone, change the feel, and if not that, a new color we haven't seen.
I still say blue or purple, and I land it's probably blue. That's
All
what I
right,
think.
right on.
All right, last question here for Will of the Force, so we can move into our discussion. Will Rey ever die on screen in a Star Wars movie? Is there? This is one of these questions I always have trouble with because it's like an ever thing, and it's like, oh my gosh, man, am I even going to be alive when like they're bringing back Daisy Ridley to finish out her Star Wars career?
Well,
We're in such a different era right now where it's like, Mark Hamill can be in these 3 movies and then he doesn't have to do anything for 40 years and then he can come back and do a couple spots, but Daisy Ridley is like, it's been a decade and she's already back at it and she's still pretty like young Rey, unless Lindelof has his way and then we get like old Rey. I don't know, man. I think that Rey eventually will die. No, I don't. I'm taking it back. I think she won't ever die on screen. I just don't think they'll ever tell that story.
I don't
because
think so
I think by the time
either.
I think by the time Daisy is old enough, I think the media landscape of how we take in stuff is going to be so different by the time she's that age.
You know what's funny? I mean, I bet years ago, like if podcasts existed and like it was 1984 or something like that, people be like, will Luke Skywalker ever die on screen? Be like, no. Why would Luke Skywalker ever die on screen? And then he died on screen.
Yeah.
If you can kill Luke Skywalker, you can kill anybody. So, and I know there was like Lindelof was like you're saying floating the idea of like a Helen Mirren playing an old Rey and like maybe she like dies like Yoda where she's like cool with it. She's under her blanket and the galaxy's safe. That's a possibility. But I'm gonna say no too. Because I don't think they will. So I'm going to say no. So a very boring Will of the Force where we agreed on everything, but that's the way and obviously Lacey would say a big no and she would probably be annoyed that I wrote this question, but that's how we do it and that's how we did it.
Yep. All right, man. Well, that's going to wrap up Will of the Force this week. How about we talk a little bit about Han Solo in our discussion?
Fire it up.
Obi-Wan once thought as you do.
The tragedy of Han Solo. Well, let me get to it. I know a lot of you are saying this is insane. You're crazy. But the Star Wars sequel trilogy took some major risks in lieu of playing it safe when it comes to the legacy characters. All 3 of the main characters from the original trilogy died in the sequel trilogy in ways that heavily impacted the story and heavily impacted other characters. Han in The Force Awakens, Luke in The Last Jedi, and Leia in The Rise of Skywalker. But only one of those didn't die with closure or resolution. Han Solo. So let's talk about the tragedy of Han Solo. So James, where I'm coming from with this, and we don't trade our thoughts before the podcast, so I don't know where you're at with this, but I was just kind of thinking about it because it's always been this hot topic. Either people who don't like the sequels because these characters died, or they do like the sequels but they don't like how the characters died, or whatever the situation may be. in my opinion, I liked that they didn't do the sort of reboot of Return of the Jedi where the gang gets together, they once again beat this new threat, even though they're older, and then they all party at the end. I kind of like that these three characters were utilized. Okay, they came back, and it was great to see them, but sort of utilized in a way to shape and help the new generation of characters, and they all had heavy impacts on that. So with Han, though, like Luke dying, he knew what he was doing. And by the end of it, he's there pretty much meditating, looking at, that beautiful bookend where he's there again, looking at these twin suns setting, and he's there and he accepts becoming one with the Force. And it's like this beautiful moment, and he accepts his fate, knowing that he put everything out there, all of his energy in order to stop Kylo. Leia, same type of thing, but this time she was giving all of her energy to stop Ben, her son, from killing Rey. So she gave her all, knowing that it would probably take her life because she's walking away from everybody. She can probably feel it in herself, and she uses all of her energy for one last time to connect with her son. Where Han Solo is out there on that catwalk, he thinks he's connecting with his son. He thinks he's finally like going to bring him home. He goes to hand him the lightsaber, and the next thing he knows, his son ignites and stabs him through the chest, and he falls to his death. Doesn't get any closure, doesn't get to say goodbye to Chewie, nothing like that. Han Solo was murdered, and he didn't have the type of like ending that we would like to see for a character that we love if they had to die in the story. So I don't know if you're with me on that. To me, it's cut and dry, but I know there's different vantage points and things like that. And there are people who I don't know why they think this way. They think Han like did that on purpose, that Han hit the button or something.
Oh, right, yeah.
Han was not expecting to be killed there. He was there. He thought he was going to bring his son home. He thought he was connecting with him. The helmet came off. He says, can you help me? And Han's like, yes, I'll do anything. And the next thing he knows, his son kills him. So that is the tragedy of Han Solo, in that he doesn't have a happy ending. And it's clouded by that memory that Kylo has in The Rise of Skywalker. So us on screen, we get to see closure happen between father and son, but that moment's not really happening. That moment's only happening inside Ben Solo's mind. So the true end of Han Solo on screen is on Starkiller Base in The Force Awakens. And it is tragic because in that moment, he thinks he actually is, redeeming himself to Leia, because the last thing she said to Han is, if you see our son, bring him home. He's like, I'm going to do it. I got him. The helmet's off. I think he's like finally realizing this. And the next thing he knows, his son kills him.
Man, it's tough when you're talking about beloved characters being killed. But I can say that I think that part of the purpose of the sequel trilogy was not just to we're going to bring back the name of Star Wars and introduce you to these three new characters, but they wanted it to be stories that connect the old to the new in a passing of a torch sort of way. And they wanted to continue the stories of the characters that are being introduced now. And you can't do that if your old characters don't die, because then they're around, It's I feel like there are always going to be situations where like they could have done this thing where like Fast and Furious 7 or whatever, like that character didn't die. They just wrote in a story where like he's like, I'm out, and like he just left, but I don't feel like when they're doing that stuff that they are working in the same world that Star Wars has been in for so long, that I don't think that it really makes a lot of sense to have Han and Leia having just gone through the situation that they did with Kylo Ren and Ben Solo to just sort of like walk away from the whole thing and be like, we're never going to smuggle again. We're never going to lead groups of whatever again. It sort of would not feel like their characters.
Like Han said, I went back to the only thing I was ever good at.
Yeah. And so like the thing is with me is like, I understand that people have issues with killing off those characters, but I also sort of know that like, once you accept that that's going to do it, then you get into the discussion of like how to do it and how they did it. And did you like the way, like we all know, not we all know, but we all know it has to be done. So how are we going to do it? And then you can get into the discussion of like, well, I like what they did with this person and didn't like what they did with this person. At the end of the day, I actually think that I do fairly enjoy all three versions of their deaths, and I'm glad that they aren't the same, but they have different purposes, and they have and they died for different reasons, and they died, and that's not the same thing. I know it sounds like I'm just saying the same thing. So they died for different reasons. Like Leia died to save her son, but that is like a sacrifice. That's like the method that she did is different. Her choice is different than the reason she's doing it. Is that going to mean like, so somebody can sacrifice themselves to save the rebellion, and somebody can sacrifice themselves to save an individual.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The difference is like Luke knew what he was doing. He knew he was dying, but he did it to himself in a sense. And the same with Leia. It was their deaths are very similar in a way. Like,
their deaths are very similar, but I'm saying so they both sacrificed themselves. But I think Leia did it to save Ben, and as the last outreach to save her son.
So Han died trying to turn his son back to the light. Luke died trying to stop that same son from killing Leia and everyone else when he was in his peak rage. And then Leia died trying to save any final shred of Ben because she knew if he killed Rey, that would have been it. Like there would have been no chance to bring him back. And she also did it obviously to protect Rey, who she saw as a daughter. So it's funny that all three deaths involve Kylo Ren, Ben Solo in different ways, as you say.
Right.
But Han's is different because the other two knew that they were going to die in using all of they had left to connect with Kylo Ren, Ben Solo in different ways. One in a, you need to stop, I'm here to stop you. Another way, Leia also saying, I need to stop you. But Luke's was like, I'm stopping you to save them. Leia's was, I'm stopping you to save you as much as I am to save Rey. And Han's was just, I want to bring my son home. I think Han had every intention of leaving Starkiller Base. His last thing he said to Chewie was, here's the detonator. We'll meet back right here. That was the last thing he said to him.
The other thing was that it felt to me that like Leia says to Han, if you see our son, convince him to come back. And he's like, oh my God, like, I hope I don't see him.
You can
like
tell.
he didn't want to confront. He wanted to go in. He wanted to do what he needed to do and get out there and not have to face the problem. But when he saw him standing there, he was struck with such morality of like, no, I know I have to confront this no matter the consequences, even if it is death. I think he knew that death was possibly on the table.
Yes.
But did it because he's like, I don't think it'll go that far though. Like he was
Yeah.
brave in that moment, because even though he knew that it was a possibility that he was either going to blow the mission, or he was going to get arrested, or he was, whatever it was, or maybe even killed. I think no matter the situation, he just like willingly went into that situation because he knew it was the right thing to do.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, like, just to kind of jump to it, I just want to kind of get to it. I like the way that Han was handled, because I think, like, of the other characters sacrificing themselves for the greater good, or whatever you want to say, I think it is important to have a story where a pivotal character is murdered as a martyr, as a symbol of, like, either how violent or evil somebody else is, that they were willing to kill this person. And at the same time, we're discussing the other side of that, which I like, which is Han didn't want to do it, but his character took over and said it's the right thing to do, which we know is always what Han does.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
I can't, now I'm blanking on his name. Who writes him? Who wrote Solo?
Lawrence
Kasdan. Yeah. Kasdan said that one time. It's like, Han's the guy who always does the right thing. And to have that situation where even when death was actually on the line, the right thing to do was to confront and just totally give yourself to that effort, the good.
Yeah. Han definitely knew that, when he's hugging Leia, he has tears in his eyes. And it was actually probably one of the more seriously acted moments since Empire for Harrison in Star Wars. But because he doesn't say anything. She says, if you see our son, bring him home. And her head is in his chest. And he's looking off like, there's a chance I'm not coming home. But he knew the way I interpret it is Han wanted to do right by Leia and right by his son. Clearly, they were estranged, both him and his son, and his relationship with Leia. And he knew if he didn't at least try and he went back, he would have had even more loss, because then Leia never would have forgave him for not trying. And then he wouldn't have been able to forgive himself for not trying to bring his son home. So he knew he had to do it. And the risk is obviously there. He's walking out on a catwalk, and it's like, not to bring too much humor into it, but it is Star Wars. Like, I was thinking about that line in A New Hope, which sort of foreshadows his own death in a weird way in a different context. But if you take the quote just as a quote, he says, attacking that battle station is not my idea of courage. It's more like suicide. It's he ends up going to this battle station to attack it, literally with Chewie with the detonators, and he leads himself to his own death.
That's funny. I never thought about that, but it's kind of similar to Mark's. Like, this was totally intentional. That, like, what do you want me to do? Face down the whole First Order with a laser sword? And it's like, by the end of the movie, he faces down the whole First Order with the laser sword.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that will always bother me about Han, just from a character perspective. From a movie and story perspective, it's great. One, because Harrison probably didn't want to come back to do another movie in full. Yes, he came back for the cameo for episode 9. That's, a couple hours on set probably. But they knew it was a one-shot deal with him. Lawrence Kasdan writing it with JJ. And what it does for the character of Kylo Ren. It's this new villain. How do you follow up Darth Vader and believe the new evil? You have this kid kill his own father, and that father happened to be one of the most popular characters in cinema history, possibly the most popular character in Star Wars history. Which Adam Driver
still deals with today.
Yeah, you killed Han Solo, recently, right? So that I get, and that was a smart move from that perspective. But in story is what I'm talking about with the tragedy of Han Solo, and it's just, there's something that always bothers me about, in whether it's real life or in stories, when a character doesn't know that their life's about to end. but we sort of know it. And it's like we're screaming at the TV like, Han, but run back, run, Han, you know? And he's there. And I think the worst part of it is that Kylo's like, he takes his helmet off and he's like, I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it. And which
of course he's talking about leaving the First Order, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Kylo's clearly talking about, I don't know if I have the strength to kill you, but Han's thinking, he's saying, I don't have the strength to go back. Yeah. And so they're both on two separate wavelengths right now. And Han is really thinking he's connecting with him. He takes the helmet off. What do you think you'll see? The face of my son. And he's not scarred or anything. It's the pure face of his son as he remembered him. And he says, will you help me? And he says, yes, anything. And he gives him the lightsaber. And then that's when all of a sudden the tension starts happening. The sun fades out because the weapon sapped all of it. And so the spotlight of the sun is gone. It's pure darkness, only red. You have Chewie watching. Just the whole thing. Even Chewie's like anguished scream after Han gets killed and he shoots Kylo in the hip is just brutal. Maybe even worse than when he falls to his knees when he hears Leia dies, because he's actually seeing Han get murdered. Han was murdered. Like it's this tragic thing. Like for Star Wars, it's the death of John Lennon. You know, it's like here's a guy who thinks he's helping a fan and gets shot in the back. It's like Han Solo thinks he's helping his son. He gets murdered. And then he just falls to his death. It's just this horrible ending because Han had so much more things he wanted to do to make things right in his life, and he was starting to get there. He's got this new mentor in Rey, and like he offers her a job, and like he's got Chewie, his best friend, still with him after all these years. He's gotten out of so much trouble, gets his ship back, starting to patch things back up with Leia, and thinks he has a shot to really become the hero to his family the way he was the hero to the galaxy. And it just got taken from him just like that by his own son. I mean, it's one of the most Shakespearean things in Star Wars. That's why like the word tragedy came to my mind, because tragedy does have its own literal like connotation when you think of the word, but in the way of telling a story, a tragedy tale, this falls right in line with that. And when I juxtapose that against the deaths of Luke and Leia and how they both sort of not took themselves out, but they knew what was going to happen in the way they used the rest of their life force. It's just brutal to think about Han's death in that way. And it'll never sit right with me because I'm like,
Han's death?
He just from a story perspective, because I don't like that Han didn't expect to die in that moment. He knew there was a chance, of course, but I think he really thought it was going the right way. And that's what makes it so tragic. It's just so sad. Especially because it's my favorite character too.
So, all right. So here's another thing is that we have this interesting perspective of like, we watch the filmmakers watch us talk about it, and then they recreate and they shaped, and then we got episode 8, episode 9, and it sort of shaped the story or whatever. And that is interesting because we're outside of that bubble, but in the bubble of just imagining the story that happens between 7, 8, and 9. I'm very curious as like, what if, because I think that what Han is doing in that moment, I talked about it earlier, is this act of courage, that he knows that death could be on the table or some type of bad thing, including like just, the mission like falling apart and them not being able to stop Starkiller Base or something like that. But regardless, the right thing to do is to go out and talk to his son. And if he doesn't do that, if he then just turns around, goes and finishes the mission, and it goes on, then I think that you do have a storyline where Kylo Ren is Kylo Ren forever. And I think one of the most interesting aspects that people don't necessarily like, because I have to admit, like, I was on board, like, after watching episode 8, I was like, I want episode 9 for it to be like, Kylo, man, die a villain. But if I think about it from that perspective and I back out, I think that if they did go that course, then it makes Han's death feel less.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I agree.
Because the way that it is right now, when you step back and you look at the thing, if Han turns around and just goes and finishes the mission, then Kylo Ren is lost forever. But because he takes the step up in that moment, and because he goes out there, it results in his death. He lost the battle, but he won the war for everybody else, because that moment is the moment that cracks his dark side facade. It split him. And
Snoke noticed that, and he said it.
Ryan obviously makes it very evident. He tries to do what he can to make Han's death justified, because he says, we lost this great character, and if I just lean into Kylo Ren being bad forever, then Han Solo was lost for no reason. So clearly what I think JJ is trying to say is this is the moment when we have this character who is so evil. How do you win him back over? It's like, you take that step of courage. You walk out onto the platform. You say, Ben, like, I'm here. Come and talk to me. I've got things to say to you. Even if death is on the table, even if you die, that step of courage is the thing that eventually will save the galaxy. And it makes Han's death worth it when we do get to 9, and he then has to turn around and look at his father, and they both come to that same realization, like, you did it. You did everything that happened between me and you. It finally led to this. And now I have to just admit that you were right, Dad. And I'm going to throw the lightsaber away, and I'm going to go be good again.
I agree. I was torn about what should they do with Kylo Ren, because, the Vader redemption thing, and we've seen that so much in Star Wars and in other stories. And he just did so many despicable things that I was like, man, they really leaned into him just going full evil. And I know that was the original plan with Colin Trevorrow, but then, when you do, when I think about, Han's death, like, it just would have felt worse if there wasn't some sort of comeback from that. And JJ, I mean, it's clear when he shot that, they immediately go to his face after he kills Han, and he has this look on his face, and he turns his head, and he's clearly sensing Leia. This is Kylo Ren, I'm saying. He's sensing Leia, her pain. Because then it goes immediately from his face looking off as though he's like sensing someone, to her grabbing her chest. And he sees the pain he caused, felt the pain he caused in her. And that, I think, is what really messed him up. So it is a very sad moment in Star Wars, which is funny because everyone thinks of TFA as like, it's the feel-good one, it's the fun one. That's the darkest moment, maybe in at least a top 3 darkest moment in Star Wars. I know there's plenty of others. I don't want to say it's the top, because then someone will be like, how could you say that's the top when blank isn't? But
did we do an episode on betrayal?
Yeah, I think we did. I mean, we're coming up on 700, so but
I feel like I was like, it might be the biggest showcase of betrayal, because everybody else who's ever betrayed anybody in Star Wars, if I'm not just right off the top of my head, is usually like a friend or someone who you thought was helping you, and they betrayed you for whatever reason. But this is the only one that's like, I think this is the only time where we've actually seen a family member go through with the process of killing another family member. Am I wrong on that?
I don't want to say because I don't want to like.
Yeah,
But
there might be another one, but right off the top of my head at the moment, please go ahead. Feel free to hit me up at Myra Trunks on Twitter. Let me know if I'm forgetting one. But
Anakin killed Shmi. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, we did an episode a little over 2 years ago, how betrayal impacts the characters and story of Star Wars.
Yeah, I remember we talked about like Lando and stuff. We probably talked about this. When did you say it was 2 years ago?
A little over 2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, so we obviously talked about Force Awakens, I'm sure. But
and
anyway.
Rise of Skywalker and all that. But yeah, so I mean, yeah, to close it out, I just thought it was interesting to think about because I don't think when people think of Han Solo, they think of his story as a tragedy. His ending is certainly a tragedy and just tragic in general. It doesn't mean his whole story is. It is like, that's why, when people always talk about Solo, and I've sort of said this, I'm sure plenty of times, it's always like, oh, it's a fun romp and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, but it also really opens another window into like this guy's loneliness and like how he didn't really have a lot. He came from nothing. And he's like, I don't have family. In Solo, he's like, I don't have a family. I come from nothing. I don't have anybody. And then he dies trying to save his only son. And his son is the one who kills him. It's just, it's supremely tragic and so sad. But to the point you threw out there that I do agree with, is that if Ben didn't return in some way, then it would have just stung way worse because then it would have been for nothing. So,
right. I think one way to look at this too, if anybody is having trouble with that, is that there is sometimes hope in certain people's death. And I mean, you can look back at historical events. I don't want to get into like specifics, but I even recently listened to a podcast where there was one specific event of like, this was happening a lot. Like people were dying regularly. And then it wasn't until like this one person died that suddenly, for whatever reason, that death became the poster child for this is a problem we have to fix. And they don't know that. The person's dead. They died, but they don't know that after their death, they become the face of the change that needs to take place. And to give a fictional example, and maybe it's not even a perfect one, but like it'd be like Thomas and Martha Wayne. Like they died a very tragic death. It was stupid. It was dumb. Like it wasn't a major villain. It wasn't anything crazy. It wasn't even anybody that even really knew who they were. They were just shot in an alley. But what it did is it caused Bruce to figure out how to take care of the crime in the city. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It becomes a symbol of good, and it all comes back to this moment where like this bad thing happens and they don't know it, but it does break Kylo Ren and cause him over the long run to be like, what am I doing?
Well, yeah, here's another example. Obi-Wan. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you could possibly imagine. Then he helps Luke blow up the Death Star. I mean, everything changed with Obi-Wan's death, even though, that's sad. Not as sad as Han's because we had just met Obi-Wan. But
and
the whole
and he's sort of still around. Like you can like he's still
that's another tragic element of Han. Han doesn't get to show up as a ghost and look at how everybody's happy. He's just dead.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm gonna just throw this out there as my final point. I don't think Ben Solo comes back if he didn't murder Han Solo, because
that's my point.
I know, but
okay. Yeah.
But so let's say he goes with him and he's like,
right,
you're right, I'm throwing this all away. I don't think anything changes. And I think the darkness still consumes him. I think because
you're thinking of it sort of the opposite. Like instead of my illustration is if Han walked away, here's what would happen. Your illustration is if Kylo went with Han, this is what would happen.
He still would have went down the dark path. I think him killing Han and him physically sensing and feeling Leia's pain changed everything and already started his path back to the light. And Snoke sensed it, which means Palpatine sensed it. And everything that happened thereafter, even though he did horrible things to keep trying to prove to himself he was with the dark side, wasn't enough. And it was Leia's final push at the end that tipped him over. So it was like Han's death started his redemption. If he doesn't kill Han Solo there, if Han doesn't go to confront him, or if he leaves with Han, Kylo Ren dies a villain. I think he stays on that path. If someone else killed Han, I think the moment he killed his father and felt the pain that his mother felt, and then the regret of having done it, that started the redemption that never would have happened if that moment didn't happen.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Still tragic for Han, though, you know. But
yeah, it's wild to take a
because Han doesn't get to see
such a wide angle macro view of that story. Because I think most of the time we just kind of think of Han's contribution to the sequel trilogy as like, oh, he was fun, and then he was murdered, and then he shows back up as a memory. And it's like, that feels very sad. Like there was a sad loss. But I challenge anybody to not take into consideration that he has a bigger role, whether he knows it or not, in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah. And, you know, he died seeing his son as a villain. He didn't get the chance to see his son come back, and he never knew that, you know? So that sucks too. But at least the audience knows that it was for good in a weird way. So that's that on that. So we want to know what you think about that conversation, the tragedy of Han Solo, the impacts it had on the story, how it was used as a storytelling device, all aspects of it. Let us know what you think in the comments or on social media, or shoot us an email, Patreon, Discord, wherever. Let's continue that conversation down the road, of course, but we hope you enjoyed this episode and this conversation. And thanks for watching, listening, being a part of TRB. The Resistance broadcast is here for you twice a week. But as James said at the top, if you would like more, patreon.com/resistance broadcast. If you just want to support the pod, $5 a month, it goes a long way. Maybe Netflix is ticking you off, and you're tired of this $20 a month for junk on there, and you want to say, you know what, I want to support a small podcast. I'm going to throw $5 TRB.
I thought you were going to go with Peacock.
Yeah. Well, pick one. But yeah, go to patreon.com/resistance broadcast. We have a lot of exclusive stuff on there, mini episodes, some polls. We have a Discord server, commentaries, all sorts of cool stuff on there, exclusive videos. Check it out at least. And if you can support us, thank you. If not, totally cool. Because the podcast, like I said, twice a week. So make sure you're subbed on your favorite podcast app. If it has a rating system, please consider rating us 5 stars and leaving a review. That'd be awesome. And of course, the YouTube channel. Let's keep trying to get those subscriber numbers up at youtube.com/@theresistance broadcast. And then a special thank you for our Patreon generals and spice runners. Carmelo, John Reese, Jetta Rosewater, Frank Grande, Nick Kratz, Chris Morales, Brian Smith, Matt Chitty, Danny, Mike Ramori, Brendan McLaughlin, Sneaky Zebra, Colin Cormier, and Dave Hornack. And the Spice Runners, David Probus, Neil Shaw, Kendall Gellner, Andrew Staley, Jeremy Myers, and the Fort Worthian. And all of our patrons, all of our listeners, all of you are part of the TRB community, and we thank you very, very much. Hit up Lacey on social media at Lacey Gilleran. She'll be back with us on TRB Live Thursday. For me, Johnny Hoey on social media and my movie podcast, Just Like the Movies. We're doing American Pie, the original, next week. James, how about you?
You can find me on any social media platform. Well, not any, I guess the main ones, Twitter and Instagram mostly, at Myra Trunks.
All right. We hope everybody has a great week, and we'll see you Thursday night on TRB Live right here on the Resistance broadcast. We'll see you around, kids.